Well, I appreciate your time. I just had a question I was going to ask you regarding the Kendra and I have been talking now and courting for a while now. I just wanted, before I stepped any further into the relationship, I wanted to get your permission to ask her if it'd be all right to marry her. I want to ask you first.
Well, that's a big step.
Hey guys, it's Katie from Without a Crystal Ball. Well. If your son was in the middle of a humongous, huge criminal case and you had some friends that might not be happy with you, what would you do to make them happier? How would you cool the waters? How would you calm the world? How would you make things smoother? Now, this is all alleged speculation and assumptions, but given the track record in this family, you just never know. So here's what's going on. There has been this long-standing rift between Paul Caldwell and Jim Bob Duggar, and the rift started not long after Josh Duggar's breed at his property at Wholesale Motor Lots, or Wholesale Motor Cars, the car lot that Josh owned. Now, there's been a lot of discussion about there's these witnesses and who are the witnesses and what are these witnesses and what are they doing and all of that. And we've never heard Paul Caldwell's name come up one time. But we know that Paul Caldwell and the Duggars were very close. Jim Bob and Paul had a good relationship. Joseph and Kendra are married. They have 3 children. And we also knew that as a product of what happened with the dust up between Paul and Jim, it all went down at church and it sort of got all kinds of messy. Jim Bob made a decision after they had this argument that was told to me by a source, told Paul that he had to move out of the property that he had been living in, which Jim Bob had been allowing him to live in for nothing. The home is the same home that is at the car lot property that's now run by Jed Duggar. Jed and Katie Duggar now live in the house that Paul Caldwell was living with his kids and Christina for like 3 or 4, 5 years. Jim Bob had made the decision, like, if you're going to stay on this property, you have to pay us rent. This was told to me by the source. And Paul and Christina decided to move out, and they were given a opportunity to live in a home that Kendra and Joseph had built. So Kendra and Joseph are still living in the log house that was, I think it's like adjacent to the Duggars property. It's very close to where the Duggars live. And they had built this house and they were going to move into it, I am told. And then they made the decision that when Christina and Paul were sort of kicked out of the house that they were renting, they let Paul and Christina move into the house. And it was going to be so that Paul and Christina could, like, my source said, save up some money and potentially, like, buy a house down the line, and that it was only going to be temporary. That's what my source told me. That temporary decision has now turned permanent because Joseph and Kendra have now sold her parents that house. Now, the quitclaim deed says that it was for $1, and then the purchase price is listed as $10,000. It's not clear if they did a superficial purchase price, because that's possible. We've seen this on other deeds that have been transferred by the Duggars. Like, I believe Joanna bought a house from her parents. The quitclaim deed had a $1 purchase, but the property purchase was something higher. And so I don't know if they paid $1 or paid $10,000, but they got a home that has like 1,500 square feet for $10,000. And that's just not common. You don't get a brand new house. Even if it was a $10,000, you don't get a brand new house in this part of Arkansas for $10,000. You don't. This house is not, it's a stick-built home. It has like 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms, and it's nice. It's a nice house. It's not massive. They have 9 kids, so for sure they're bursting out of the seams in this house, but it's still a roof over their heads. And there's quite a bit of property on this land, or on this where their house is. So the home that Kendra and Joe built for themselves is now her parents' house. And it was given to them for $10,000, maybe, or $1, depending on how you look at it. This is always my question because this purchase happens in August. What is going on? Why are they all of a sudden getting this house? Because you have to understand with the Duggars that even though the kids own a lot of the properties and a lot of the properties are in their names, Jim Bob really does control a lot of it. And each year, if you look at the property records, they have this habit of moving properties into other kids' names. So they buy a piece of property and then they deed it to Jason or Justin or whoever. And then, you know, a couple years later, it's flipped back to them. The records that when you go into like Washington County or even Benton County are extensive. And the Duggars are consistently buying properties or transferring properties within the family. And it happens a lot. And I can't say why. I don't want to speculate. I don't know. When you think of it in that context, even though one of them owns something, you have to realize that Jim Bob is the one that put the money down for these properties. The kids don't really have their own assets. They don't really have their own money. So Jim Bob's gifting them properties, and then they have the properties for a period of time, and then they do stuff with the property. And for many of them that are independent and have their own incomes, like say Joy and Austin, who were gifted a home by Jim Bob, they have their own business. They are like Austin is a licensed contractor, so he has his own company. Something I think is incredibly interesting is that John David, he owns the property that MediCorp lives on. So the building that MediCorp is, the organization, the nonprofit that he runs, is on the same property as his mobile home, and it's like an RV park. And he owns that outright. And so everyone has always said, like, why did he end up in an RV or like in a trailer when all the other kids got houses? And I do think that it might have been that John wanted to buy the house himself. And I think maybe he didn't want the big house and he was single for a while and I think he owned that well before he and Abby got married. And it's right next to MediCorp, which is a nonprofit that he runs that he's really involved with, that he likes to spend all of his time with, that according to records, he doesn't get paid for. He has his own property, which I think he's actually worked for. But the others in the family, I think, you know, they haven't had to work as hard. Like Jessa and Ben got their house for free. Ginger and Jeremy, obviously, they're out of the loop now. Josh and Anna just bought that piece of property I just told you about. Joseph and Kendra live on the house that was owned by the Duggars at one point. Josiah and Lauren live in a home that was also owned by Jim Bob Duggar and I think Mary Duggar at one point. All the kids that are married other than Ginger and Jill at this point live in homes that are not connected to the Duggars. Jill and Derek bought their own home in a subdivision. They have a mortgage or maybe they paid cash. I don't know. Their house is like a rambler. I think it's got a couple bedrooms, couple bathrooms, maybe 1,500 square feet. They purchased that on their own without help from the Duggars. It always makes me wonder if Jim Bob is somehow involved in this transaction. Long story short, is Jim Bob somehow doing this to sort of calm the waters with Paul? Were there loose lips coming? Was Paul potentially going to be a witness? Was Paul have information for the government? Like, I don't want to say that like he's involved in this, but the timing of all of this happened so close to the raid and when all of these interviews were happening. So I've always wondered like what happened between Jim and Paul. Why did Jim kick him out? Well, Judd bought the house, but then still, why did Jim kick him out? And then why now is Joseph just handing over to his father-in-law a house that he and his wife built? This was a house that they built. They did this together. Like Kendra and Joe were building this home for themselves. They were going to move into this home. That was the plan. And then everything blew up with the Duggars, and Paul and Christina needed a place to live. And now that house that was going to be their new dream house is now going to be their parents' house. It's such a weird situation. So Kendra and Joseph give mom and dad a house. Is Jim Bob involved in the mix of this? Is this to calm waters? Is this Joseph trying to help out his father-in-law? is like, what is going on here? Does this mean that things have gotten better with the Caldwells? Are they trying to improve relations with the Caldwells? Are they trying to calm down the Caldwells? I don't really know. I know that from when I talked to my source, when everything went down between the Caldwells and the Duggars, it was really devastating for the Caldwells because they lost a lot of friends. And Jim Bob and Michelle allegedly took a lot of the people that they were at church with, and they went to a new church, which they're still at, called Gospel Light Baptist Church. So they lost a ton of members. Like, they have only a couple dozen left at Paul's church now. So what does this all mean to you? I know this is a lot of speculation, but there's always just so much randomness in this situation, right? So tell me what your thoughts are in the comments below. Bye, guys.